How you doing today? Thank you for braving the cold. It's like 37 degrees in the traffic and kind of getting out here and kind of thinking about kind of learning more about what's happening with our elections in our county. So I really appreciate it. So please give me a round of applause for kind of coming out here. I also want to thank the Sheridan Baltimore North. They're extremely busy today and they're always accommodating with us and kind of making space for us. So I think COVID is kind of coming over because it's really slammed in here. They got groups all over the place. So we're really excited about them always partnering with us and creating a space for us. So please give them a round of applause for giving us a great space. We have a little bit of a smaller group today, so that we're gonna have our speaker Andrew Griffin going through what's happening with the election as well as with the legislative session. Then afterwards, we're gonna have a really kind of spirited kind of Q&A. So if you have any questions, kind of please have those kind of ready. We're gonna have a nice portion afterwards. We're gonna be able to do that, and we're gonna be recording that. So we're gonna create a little vignette of some of the speakers and some of the questions, be able to send that over to the rest of our particular members. So please have those questions ready. Andrew's really versed on everything that's happening downstate as well as what's happening with the election. So please listen carefully and have your questions ready. He'll have some great information for you to kind of follow up from there. I also want to go through the group and say thank you once again for coming out, and I want everyone to kind of just say, stand up, tell us a little about yourself and kind of why you came out here. So we're going to start with this particular table on the left-hand side. Since we have an elected official kind of joining us today, we have Delegate Michelle Guyton over here, so please give her a round of applause and let her say a few words.
Delegate Michelle Guyton. I represent North Towson, currently after Pennsylvania, but that will change January 11th when we get sworn in, and I'll be Hunt Valley south to Towson, to North Towson.
Awesome.
So happy to be here.
Awesome. We'll keep going around to the right. Alan?
Oh, Alan Hirsch from Alan Hirsch Advisors. I believe in making a difference in people's lives. I work as an executive coach, helping businesses and business owners change the way they do business so they make more money.
Awesome. Thank you, Alan. Okay.
Hi, I'm Kristen. I'm with Maryland Restoration. We do water mitigation, any mold removal. We do a full build-back service, so if you have interior repairs need to be done, flooring, carpeting, we do all of that. We also partner with Mid-Atlantic Remodeling, who does roofing, siding, windows, doors. So we have you covered from the inside out.
Can you write my commercial too? Because that was perfect in like 25 seconds.
Absolutely.
Sir?
Hi there, I'm Adam Rappaport from Strategic Factory. We're a marketing collateral firm, so print, promo, signage, and agency services. I'm here today because I love to see Baltimore County grow, so I'm happy to be here with everyone.
Sir?
I'm Mike Schmidt, owner of Mid-Atlantic Remodeling, Maryland Restoration Services, and Carpets, etc. Kristen is my counterpart that runs Maryland Restoration Services and Carpets, etc. way better than I ever could. But Mid-Atlantic Remodeling, we're all exteriors, a lot of insurance restoration, so hailstorms, windstorms, hit houses. We get insurance companies to pay for those things. And we partner with a lot of property management companies for the restoration side of our businesses. So kind of like Kristen said, from the inside out. Yep,
A little bit more detail, not as concise as Kristen, but we'll take it. So let's get over here to this table over here. Ma'am?
My name is Joanna Crowder. I'm the owner of Lovely Lace Styles. It's a salon studio in Owens Mills where I provide beauty services to my guests as well as apprenticeship training to individuals interested in the industry as well.
Me. I am Jessica Winter. I'm with Connect Pay Payroll Services. I work solely with the local small business community. I'm a payroll specialist. It's what I do. It's what I love, and I'm passionate to help those who are starting businesses or have been in there for a long time. So if you know of anybody, please think of me.
My guy in the bow tie. And he tied it perfect too. I can never get it right.
This is my one of 100 bow ties I own. Joey Fink with Morgan Stanley Wealth Management. We are advice beyond investing. So I know a lot of people think, oh, Morgan Stanley, you're just there to manage our investments. Anything finance related we work with, small businesses, business owners, the Maryland Saves program when it comes to retirement plans for your businesses. We help manage those along with working with individual households. Excited, I just moved back to the Baltimore area, so excited to be back in the Baltimore area. Thank you.
Where'd you move from?
Minnesota.
Ooh. Oh, no.
It was snowing yesterday.
All right. That's one of the beauties of Maryland. We get cold weather without the precipitation most of the time, so we'll take it. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Julie Olson with Baltimore County Public Schools. I'm the Work-Based Learning Coordinator at Lansdowne High School. And we are looking for partnerships to help place our students who are looking for internships and apprenticeships.
Alicia Fails, Baltimore County Public Schools Office of Career and Technical Education, where I supervise all work-based learning programs, apprenticeships, internships, and career development programs.
Awesome. And we have our speaker, Vice President of Government Affairs for the Maryland Chamber of Commerce, Andrew Griffin. Please give him a round of applause. He's going to be our speaker today.
Hear me probably talk enough, so nice to be here.
Awesome. Once again, thank you, Andrew. I want to give a couple announcements here. Our next kind of meeting will be on January. Oh, I am so sorry. I am so sorry. In the back.
Good morning, I'm Deborah with the Sheridan Baltimore North, and thank you for being here. If we can help you with any of your guest room or meeting needs, please let us know. We're here to help.
Thank you. She's doing a great job because this place is filled. Sir?
Oh. Hi, I'm Doc Richardson. I'm with the Screen Actors Guild. And what we would like to see happen in Baltimore County is what happened in Harford County. Harford County was the center for House of Cards and made hundreds, if not millions, for that county. And there's no reason why it can't happen here. So thanks for having me.
Thank you. I appreciate that. A couple of announcements here. Our next group meeting will be on January 12th. It'll be our education breakfast with BCPS Superintendent Dr. Darrell Williams. That's one of our finer functions. He really goes through a good job of explaining what's happening with the school system. So if you're appreciated with that, if that's something that you're interested in, please put that on your agenda as well. Also, there is some grant information I did want to kind of speak about. Also, there's a telework grant that has just dropped also by Maryland Chamber of, not the Maryland Chamber of Commerce, by Maryland State. That is for businesses that have physical locations. We'll have some information about that. We'll send that out on our next email as well, but we definitely want to put that on your agenda. There's a small window for that, and I know our members are really, really active in that grant procurement process, so please put that on your agenda as well. But let's bring all of our speaker here. Andrew Griffin from the Maryland Chamber of Commerce. Please give him a round of applause.
Wireless microphone. I know you're recording. Is it okay if I?
Yes, sir.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. I came here last year as well. I enjoyed it. Andrew Griffin, Vice President of Government Affairs, Maryland Chamber of Commerce. For those of you that are unfamiliar with the Maryland Chamber of Commerce, we are the largest business advocacy organization in the state, over 6,500 members. We represent everybody from the largest businesses, right? So think of Baltimore businesses, think of your McCormick's or T. Rowe Price's or Under Armour's, your big businesses, all the way down to your small single, dry cleaner, one single person. We do the full gamut, right? Business issues from labor, employment, and corporate tax, all the way down to I can't get a parking space out front of my business, so I get no foot traffic. So we do everything. That leads to us having many masters sometimes. So we have the difficult job of being the voice primarily at the state level of the business community. So we sift through the issues, we try to decide what's most important, and advocate on making the state, frankly, making the state more competitive. That's really what we do. So I'm going to talk maybe as long or as little as you want me to about both election stuff and things I think we can expect in 23. And please, this is a small group, so chime in if you have an opinion or a thought as to anything that I'm going to say. So obviously the election that we just had, really interesting election here. Maybe some people kind of thought it was kind of boring, but really it was an interesting election. Historic in some senses, right? We just elected the state's first African American governor. It's the only time in our state history that we've elected a new governor, a new comptroller, and a new attorney general at the same time. So we have 3 new faces in statewide office with vastly different policy ideas and agendas from the previous people who held those positions. So, and then the legislature. So I don't know, I'm going to use the word historic turnover in the legislature, but I think it's like 45 new faces in the House of Delegates alone. That's almost a third of the body. And then the state senate is going to have some significant changeover. And as the Moore team comes in, we assume that some members of the legislature will get tapped to go work in his administration. So we'll continue to see some turnover and new faces. I think the first thing, the most important thing with turnover in any election is building new relationships. As business owners, as business people, particularly in Baltimore County, it is such a, Baltimore County is in the Baltimore region, it's such an important area for the state, business-wise, economic-wise, right? And you have such a large and important delegation that the relationship that you all have with your elected officials is really, really important. So new faces means you got to spend some time to get out to build some new relationships. So I will just say that. I'll talk about kind of each of the new individuals at the state level, and I think some things that we all need to kind of be aware of. Some of it will be interjected with my opinion. Some of it will be actual things that we think at the chamber to expect. So, yeah. Take a note, chew that in some instances. The change in governor. Wes Moore is going to be vastly different than Larry Hogan. Right? I think Larry Hogan, we have enjoyed, generally speaking, we've enjoyed 8 years of pretty, what I would say, steady Eddie fiscal management of the state budget, right? I think by all accounts, everyone kind of liked it, right? Not a whole, obviously some back and forth between him and the legislature, but for the most part, the state's been in good financial straits, no tax increases, which everybody likes, generally, and it's all good things. I think what we're going to see, the difference with Wes Moore coming in, Wes Moore has a lot of big ideas. Many of them very good. I can tell you that from the Maryland Chamber, we have been really encouraged in our conversations with him and his team about what he describes as his economic competitiveness agenda. He is really going to make a concerted effort to write some of try to make Maryland a more competitive, business-friendly, competitive state, right? I think the reality is, unfortunately, sometimes perception is reality. Perception is politics. She knows this. Perception is politics. And, we've spent, 10 years at the bottom of every single corporate tax list or business environment. We're always at the bottom, always. And why is that? Well, when you spend enough time down there, eventually you just get tagged with the label. And even if you're not there anymore, people are just like, oh, you're just a bad place to do business. So I think Wes Moore wants to really tackle that. And it's a serious challenge. How do we change the perception of doing business in Maryland? And especially, regional economic competitiveness is really real. We see Virginia continuing to push the envelope on economic competitiveness. Pennsylvania just did for many years we could point to Pennsylvania and say, oh, well, we're not the highest corporate tax rate in the region. Pennsylvania is at 9.99. That's not the case anymore. They're lowering their corporate tax rate to 4.99 over 15 years. And so even Pennsylvania is like, they're pushing the envelope on how do we attract business? How do we attract retirees, right? I think anyone just saw that U.S. News World Report of best places to retire. 2 of the top 5 places were in Pennsylvania, interestingly, coming above Florida and North Carolina. Glenn Youngkin in Virginia is going to push through the legislature this upcoming legislative session there to zero out all income taxes on retirement income. That will be lower than, everyone always tries to compete with North Carolina and Florida. It will beat both of them. And so we already compete with Virginia for retirees and for businesses. That's yet another step, right? It's a challenge for us, right? And so I think Wes Moore knows that to be true. If any of you have heard him speak, right? Every time he goes to another state, he wants to impact 3 businesses. I think he's going to make a good, honest, solid, concerted effort to change some things. Do I think that we're going to have a race to the bottom in that, hey, we need to have the lowest corporate tax rate, hey, we need to have no retirement income taxes? I don't think that that's the case, and I don't know that that's going to change anything. But I think you have to continue to remain competitive and look at ways to attract business and to attract talent, workforce. I mean, that's a huge, it's an area that we are really rich in. Right? We have a highly educated workforce, but we have to retain them. And so I think he's going to make a good effort there. I think that there are, with that said, I think that there are some areas, and I'm not going to say that they're necessarily concerns, but I will say that a lot of his ideas are going to cost some money. And I'm not saying that that's not worth merit, right? I think universal pre-K, I think we can all generally agree that's great. I think his idea of service year in high school, I think we all generally like that idea. Both of those things cost a lot of money. The blueprint for Maryland's Future Fund, many of you guys have probably heard about that. It's underfunded and is projected to be underfunded going forward, and that's an issue. The digital advertising tax, which was just struck down as unconstitutional, was a way that they thought they were going to pay for this, for new policies in education. Well, now they have to come up with that money because they're not going to be able to get that ready. So I think that there's going to be real challenges on the table. Many times when we talk about raising revenue, it's not popular to tax individuals, right? No one wants to take your money out of your pocket, but it's easier to take it off the backs of business because it's kind of like, it's not an individual, it's an amount, and they feel not as bad taxing business. And so I think that those are some of the concerns, is that some of his ideas are costly, and when the budget goes up, that money has to come from somewhere. And more often than not, unfortunately, they do tend to look at business. And so we're going to see this push and pull in that he wants to try to make the state more competitive, but also some of these other ideas, which you may not immediately connect to as a business issue, they're going to be costly, and that's going to, the budget's going to be more. So I think that those are things that we're watching. The new comptroller, a switch to Peter Francho, someone who's been around for many, many years, served in the legislature, comptroller for 16 years. Pretty laid back kind of guy. I think most people know him now as being Hogan's buddy on the Board of Public Works. For those of you who aren't super in tune, this is kind of like, the Board of Public Works is essentially a 3-member board that votes on public works projects. It's really unique here in Maryland. No other states have something like this. But essentially, if you want a bridge or if you want a road paved or any kind of a large public works project over $1 million, it has to go before this 3-person board for them to vote and approve the contract. So it gives them a lot of power. So 2 new members on that board, three new members, that's right. 3 new members on that board, new state treasurer. And Brooke Learman, the new incoming comptroller, will be that new face. I think Brooke is going to represent from Baltimore City. Baltimore really made out this election, guys. You got a governor from Baltimore, you have a comptroller from Baltimore, the speaker is from Baltimore. That's good. It's good for attention in Baltimore. I think with Brooke, what you can expect is Peter Francho was kind of a guy that sit back, was a little quiet, thought of himself to be a little fiscally conservative on the Board of Public Works. I think Brooke is the opposite of him. I think she's going to use her statewide office, right? She's a statewide elected official, to make some big policy statements. And I think she's not, she's going to use it as a bully pulpit a little bit. She's not going to be afraid to push the envelope of either of the governor or the legislature on issues that she thinks are important. It will be interesting to see how her relationship with the new governor and the treasurer pan out on the Board of Public Works. It will be something to kind of watch. If you need stuff to put you to sleep at night, and go back and watch Board of Public Works meetings. That will be really interesting. But I think most importantly for the business community, what does the comptroller do that impacts us? Well, the comptroller is the tax enforcer. It's the tax collector and the tax law interpreter. That's what he does, he or she does. And under Peter Francho, I would say, and I'm not saying that this is going to be the case with Brooke, we've enjoyed a really open comptroller's office and someone who worked with the business community. If the legislature would pass laws that many times are difficult to interpret, he was always willing to work with us and kind of took the side of the business, to be honest, 9 times out of 10. I think Brooke is the new comptroller is going to be open to business, but I don't think that she's going to be necessarily as forgiving all the time. And I think we could see tax enforcement increase a bit. Think what President Biden did with the IRS and his additional funding, right? Kind of beefing up tax enforcement from the federal level. I could see, I think it's a very real possibility that a new comptroller, Brooke Learman, would maybe look to do the same, right? Especially if the state has to kind of go through the couch cushions looking for cash. Sure, you know, I think that she's going to go through people's tax returns with a fine-tooth comb, particularly business. So I think that's what you can expect there. And then the legislature, Democrats continue to pick up seats, both in the Senate and in the House of Delegates. And so they've continued to increase their supermajority. I think that the newer members, particularly the majority party, this is Andrew opinion.
Speak freely, Andrew.
This is Andrew opinion, not opinion of the Maryland Chamber. You know, they continue to kind of move to the left a little bit. And that becomes challenging for the business community. Because as that happens, and it's not just the majority party, I will also say the Republicans, the few of them in both chambers, continue to go to the right. So on business issues, you know, you used to be able to just get blatant like Republican support and you'd have a lot of just centrist Democrats. Now I have to fight with Democrats and Republicans on business issues. It's really kind of difficult now. So it's going to be a more challenging environment. I will say that both presiding officers, the speaker's fantastic. I mean, if you certainly live on the west side of Baltimore County and she's your delegate, I would strongly encourage you to get to know her. She is a phenomenal woman. We have a great relationship with her. She is very level-headed, very even-handed, I would say that. And so I think we're going to rely a lot on the legislative leadership to see sense in a lot of difficult policies with negative impacts on the business community. I don't know that we'll see as much, I'll say, inflammatory legislation in the General Assembly with all democratically controlled government, basically. I think the legislature is going to take a lot of its, it's going to key off the governor. What is the governor? And so we may not see, 7 versions of the same policy because no one really has any idea as to what direction it should be going. I think that they'll be queuing off Westmore, and that's kind of good in a sense, stability. So that's what I think we can expect from the legislature. New faces, like I said, 45 new people. I don't know a third of the House of Delegates now. I have to go make new friends. Certainly members of the Senate, I have to go make new friends, which is difficult every 4 years. So I'll stop there and see if there's any questions election related before I talk about the things I think we all need to worry about. And then I will preface it every time. Every time I give this talk, I look at the crowd and it's like, who invited the Grim Reaper?
You want me to give my inside information on some of the things you just said?
Yeah, insider info.
Are we still taping that?
We may have to not tape.
We can edit.
We can edit it out. How's that sound?
All right, so I don't even need that because I think we're small.
Yeah.
Wow. I don't disagree.
Can you use the mic because we hear you better with the video?
Probably
Unless
not.
you don't want to
We'll
As a matter of fact, I'll stand over here. So I will say that, first of all, do you have someone on the transition team from the chamber?
We do.
Okay, yeah.
We're very fortunate in that sense to be able to participate in a new transition of both Brooke and the governor.
Great. Okay, so I'm on there as well, and I'm also on a nomination committee for the Maryland Legislative Women's Caucus, which is specifically trying to find women, sorry, gentlemen, to promote into some of those nomination appointed positions. So if you're interested in those, or you know someone who is, then please reach out and let me know. That's my role this year for the beginning of the year. I would say that when you talk about looking for money under the cushions, we don't have to do that, right? We have a $7 billion surplus in Maryland. And the reason that I want to point that out, and I'm so confident that we're not gonna have to do that, is just last week, because I do serve on Ways and Means, that is your tax committee, if you don't know, which is probably one reason I'm here.
That's the reason.
That's the reason. But we have so much surplus that I personally cannot imagine that we're going to start raising taxes on anyone in Maryland. As a matter of fact, I am working, and we'll talk about this after the meeting, particularly for retirees in Maryland to reduce their tax or eliminate their tax responsibilities to the state. So I hope and I believe that there's going to be a little more equilibrium. Then I know we always have to worry about worst case scenarios. You know, the tax has been Democrats, which I am not, and many of my colleagues are not. There may be some, right? But but I think it's been easy for the last 4 years in Ways and Means. I haven't voted for any tax increases, which may also be why I'm here, right? So being sort of more fiscally moderate and conservative, but also being much more socially liberal is sort of how I see most of the members of my committee. Now, we do have a lot of new members, so we'll see how that rolls. And leadership is changing all over the place. We're losing some big members of the General Assembly with a lot of clout, and hopefully some of the other ones of us will get a chance to have some of that. But right now, we don't know what that looks like. I would say communicate, and you do that really well, communicate with us. I do want to say, right now, I think the Moore administration is, and I'm fully supportive of his initiative. They're getting off to a little slow start, so if you're in transition, you know that it's taken a while to get some of that done, which is a little bit concerning, but it will happen. You know, he doesn't have the legislative background that most of the people running for governor would have, but he's got a lot of energy and great ideas, and he's already pulling really smart, qualified people to be around him, and I think that's going to determine his success. Like Lukey, Eric Lukey's going, you know, our majority leader is going to go and be his policy director. So he's going to have good people who know what they're doing. So I want everyone to maybe breathe a sigh of relief about that. And those people are very reasonable as well. So Lukey in particular, he is also, okay, sometimes he proposes some tax increases, but he's generally
You just talk him off.
don't let him scare you. But he's generally aware of these issues and pretty responsible and responsive to the business community. I think in Baltimore County, we generally have it, and I know you're concerned about statewide. In Baltimore County, we tend to have a more fiscally conservative delegation in general, because we got a lot of hard districts. You know, mine is like, I'm a Democrat, which gives me a little more option to get things done, which is great. But my district actually, my old district was mostly Republican, so we have to kind of walk that line and listen to everyone. And we have a lot of us in Baltimore County, so we are business friendly. We want to do what is going to make people and families the strongest, and if we don't have jobs and we don't have a strong business community, and we don't have job training programs, so I'm all about CTE. Then you know everything else will fall apart. So I think we do recognize that. I want to say it's funny because I know Peter Francho really well, and I've never thought of him as quiet. Like he uses that bully pulpit. And I know Brooke really well. He did. Yes. And I will say that she's brilliant. I mean, Brooke Learman is the smartest, I was going to say woman, person that I know. She's brilliant. She's committed. She knows what she's doing. So she's not coming from she's going to hit the ground running. She's going to know what's going on. And she's been on the chair of the subcommittee for pensions and retirement for a while. So I think you're actually going to see some good things happen there that she hasn't been able to push forward before.
I think with Brooke, I think the thing that would be a real positive for the business community with a new comptroller is a modernization of the comptroller's office. Mm-hmm. You know, our comptroller's office is like dealing with like 1920s technology. I mean, a lot of this stuff is still paper pushing, right? So when you call and you have a tax question, you're like, well, I got to run down the hall to ask this person to get the answer to come back up here. I think that's going to go away, and that's going to really be a headache off the shoulders of a lot of businesses. So, and individual taxpayers as well, right? Because you all also pay taxes.
Yeah, and I mean, I think what people sometimes forget too is that we pay taxes in the legislature. And we have businesses on the side, and we, you know, so it's not as if it's an us against them situation, and that's sometimes how people look at it, but it really isn't that way at all, so. Yeah, we'll continue to work on what you all need, but you know, we really are here to support the business community, so I just wanna make sure that
Yeah.
promise.
Yeah,
Promise.
I know you are, that's why I asked you to come here. Good, yes, no, great comments, and I will say one more, go ahead.
Question.
Yep.
How did the state accumulate $7 billion surplus? And
Right.
what would be the prime areas to utilize that?
Yeah, everybody wants a piece of that,
Yep.
right? So that's, we've had so many people come before us and say, there's all this money, I know how we should spend it. The problem is that there are a million people saying that, right? Last year, we were really conservative with it, because we had $6 billion last year. We were really conservative with that money. I believe, I don't know for sure, I don't make these decisions unilaterally. I believe that much of that will fund the education system, because the governor is 100% committed to doing that. My committee, I'm also on education, is 100% committed to funding that. But it's underfunded only in the fact that it isn't completely funded throughout the whole 10-year process, right? It's not underfunded for now, right? So we will easily be able to make up that difference. You know, if we fully fund it for the next it is already funded for the next 5 years, but if we fully fund the next 5 years, we'll still have a surplus, okay? We have a lot of money accruing, and a lot of that is thanks to Franco, right?
Yeah.
That is true.
So the surplus it's a combination of things. So
COVID money.
It's hard to point specifically, but one of them, there's a lot of one-time money in there that came from the federal government. I think something that is really interesting, if you also need some stuff to put you to sleep at night, you can watch the Bureau of Revenue Estimates. So
Don't do it.
But during COVID, all this time we were closed and people were out of work, the state still saw really healthy tax payments. So it's not like all of a sudden people stopped paying taxes, or in fact, that people stopped buying things, right? None of that happened. And so revenue continued to come in, and as we, certainly now as we're seeing inflation, right, prices go up, revenue goes up because taxes are higher. Theoretically, the same good, just costs more. So, you know, collection has been really healthy. You certainly, there's been really good fiscal stewardship of the state budget. Francho, Larry Hogan, former Treasurer Kopp, and now Treasurer Derek Davis, I think the three of them really did a great job of managing the state's finances to get the state in this very healthy position. And so there's a lot of ideas on how to spend that money. You know, I think education will certainly be there. We've seen the new governor talk about beefing up the state workforce. That's a huge issue for government services, for business, certainly. I mean, when you reach out for a service from any department here and they're so understaffed that you can't get even a response, I mean, that's terrible. And so I think there's going to be a big focus on that. I think the speaker is going to focus a lot on state workforce development. That's going to cost money, so I think some of that will go to that.
Some of the tax credits that we put in place as emergency relief, like the child, low-income child income tax credits, I think those will become permanent, right? So they were meant to just sort of alleviate some of the issues during COVID, but that's what Peter Francho would say still is a lot of this, it's billions and millions and millions and millions of dollars, but it's still budget dust is what he always said, like budget dust, you can find that under a couch cushion in this kind of surplus. So what else we do with it, the state likes to keep a lot of money in reserve, right? So one of the arguments that we can make now is perhaps we kept too much money in reserve, and that's why we have a $7 billion surplus, and people are still paying. So some of that might be, hopefully, tax relief for our retirees, right? I'm hoping that some of that can go towards that. But one thing you said that's super important is that this isn't sustainable money. This isn't money that's going to keep coming to us, so we do have to be pretty careful with how we spend it, because we can't count on it to keep coming in. Yeah.
I know for the last 2 years, they had a business revitalization grant.
Yep.
Yeah,
Like
all
we're
those.
gonna have that again this year.
I think a lot of those things that have worked well, and we always look at the data to see how it's being utilized for those grants. That they are generally, I think, I mean, I would certainly vote to continue those,
I would say
if they're being utilized well.
To the delegate's point, some of those tax credits and certainly some of those grant programs, which are really just, that's just funding in the budget.
Right.
I would be really surprised to not see them continue to be funded because they've been utilized.
Right.
And I think that that's really important. When stuff is used in the state, typically what we see is the legislature will respond and say, okay, well, this is actually benefiting people. We're going to continue this kind of a program. Whereas other things that may go in the books and not be used as often, it's much more, it's harder to keep it.
How do you think they would do with, one more, I'm sorry, how do you think they would do with grants for like private schools? We have an organization looking to start a private school in Baltimore City.
I don't think that that's going to be very helpful for
Yeah.
private schools with this new administration.
Also really contentious issue, and I don't know enough about education, you definitely have to
Yeah,
ask.
I can
her.
talk to you about
Cool,
that,
thank you.
about what make a difference depending on what the
With the
focus is.
with the personal income tax higher than the corporate income tax, small businesses, which are 95% of the businesses in the state of Maryland, those owners are penalized. They have to pay higher taxes on the transfer of income. Is that ever going to be balanced?
We've worked on some fixes around pass-through entities and like rectifying some of the taxes there. I think it's whenever we're talking about the corporate tax rate, it's a difficult conversation. It is not politically ever something that we want
I'm
to
not
talk
talking, I mean, it's,
You're talking about the first.
I'm talking about the personal.
Yeah, and so
being
it's just-
reduced
That
down
we can do.
to the same level as the corporate,
Yeah,
so that pass-through incomes
yeah.
are taxed at the same rate, because the vast majority of
Yeah.
businesses
Because it creates a
are
perversion.
pass-through.
Yeah.
I know, I forget the name of the commission
Yeah.
that did it. I had a discussion with him on my radio show,
Yeah.
and they balanced it, then they changed the rate again, and it was back again.
I thought that we fixed that 2 years ago, actually. I think that we did.
I will,
So
I
I
will
think-
double check. We'll
Yeah,
double check.
I'm very certain because we worked on specifically on pass-through entities, specifically dealing
It
with
was a
individual.
$20,000 pass-through credit.
Correct, and that came off, we took that off the books because now there is the option, you can pay the lower corporate rate. Well, I will get you the specific answer.
Give
2
me
years
the
ago, we
an-
passed a
I don't know
bill
the answer.
which like flew through the legislature because it was
Okay.
like overwhelmingly
Okay.
supported as like this needed to be fixed.
Okay, and I apologize, I've got to
No,
leave
it's
in a couple
okay.
minutes.
That's okay.
So, but thank you for
Same
that.
question, different question?
No, kind of back to like grants and credits. The state has had for a number of years, program for solar.
Okay.
For homeowners that they,
Yep.
I think between federal and state, something like 33% tax credit. Is that something, it's been highly utilized.
Yeah,
Is that something that you see continuing for a while?
It's yes for two reasons. One, as long as it's being, so generally, as long as it's being used, I think that that's what you need to, as long as it's being used, it will continue to stay on the books. Second, thinking broadly on like energy policy stuff, as the state continues to move to, lowering greenhouse gas reductions, zero emissions, renewables, those are not only going to stay on the books, but you're going to probably see incentives increase.
Thank you.
Because that certainly helps
Oh, yeah.
that business model.
Absolutely.
Because the ROI straight without them doesn't really work.
Doesn't work,
yet.
yeah.
And that return on investment, it doesn't make sense without having those credits in place. And you have some other states like that are, far more liberal, like say Oregon, where they're upwards of close to 48% between federal and state together. Now it's funny that their state has clouds and rain all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
So it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, but versus.
Yeah, I would, I think the answer would be yes. I don't know for a fact, but I would. They would be hard pressed to lower it or remove it, but with the push to lowering greenhouse gas emissions and going to net zero, the incentives have to be there and have to be increased. So I would be surprised if that came off the books.
And a continuation of that question, Do you see Maryland doing something similar to what California did and saying, hey, by
Clean cars.
2030, no
Okay.
gas vehicles?
Real solid contentious issue. Can't wait to talk about this real quick. So, so we automatically adopt those air quality standards. We attach our air quality standards to California's. We're kind of already in,
So you see that
right?
coming.
Now, I think that there's I think that there's some actual, like formality, I think there's actual formalities that, I think maybe the legislature has to take, or AELR has to take to formally adopt those regulations, but more or less we've already adopted them. And so, I've had some conversations around that issue with some of the legislative leadership. Here's what I know. I know that there's probably going to be a piece of legislation to decouple from California's air quality standards. I don't think that legislation is going to go anywhere. Whether or not it has merit, I just think it's politically probably not feasible. But I think there's very real discussions around that issue specifically. When you try to compare California to Maryland in clean cars on the road, and it's very difficult to compare, right? I think we have something like 9% adoption of electric vehicles. California has like 18% adoption of electric vehicles. So we're light years behind them. So to make the switch the same way that California is kind of, we don't have the infrastructure California has. It's a weird issue. It's a contentious one because I don't know that anyone has a solid answer on the way forward as to how to address it. But as of where we sit today, we have adopted those exact same standards. And so, theoretically, yes, we would have no more sale of new gas-powered vehicles by 2035. 2030 to 2035 in Maryland. But as it stands today, I don't know that that's going to be the case in like a couple years because I don't know that we're quite ready for that. But that's as it stands today.
I think one of the big concerns there is that those cars are still so expensive, they're not accessible to a lot of people, so. Yeah, so I mean, by 2035, perhaps they will be, but we're not gonna just, not gonna just push it on everyone and say you can't drive if you don't do this, because we're still looking at Tesla
If
prices.
you want to get a new car,
Yeah.
and you change cars or you change your phone, it's just, it's not a good, I don't even know who right at
And it does apply. We've been dealing with tough questions around this, as you can imagine. Obviously, if you are in a business that deals with logistics or transportation or any of that kind of stuff, right? It does not apply to heavy-duty vehicles, right? So if you put 18-wheelers, fleet, those kinds of things, it does not apply to you. Obviously, used cars can continue to be sold as, this is us just knowing what we know about what's going on in California right now. I don't think that it's a perfect fit here, and so the legislature is they're gonna have to figure out how to make it fit because it's not a perfect carbon copy quite. So, all right. So I'll just touch on a couple more items. Or you tell me when you want me to just stop talking.
Yeah, that's what I say top.
All right. Tell me when you want me to stop talking, and then I'll touch on a couple hot items which will be slightly depressing, and then I'll take questions. Things I think that we're going to have to deal with this year. One, there's going to be a push, particularly out of the House, to totally revamp the unemployment insurance system. Sounds like a good idea, except all the bills that they want to push are going to increase costs. That's an important thing. It's going to be higher taxes on businesses. Unemployment insurance system doesn't work perfectly. We all agree to that. It does need some overhaul, but I don't know that necessarily the answer is to increase benefits and increase tax rates on them. Maybe increase benefits, certainly don't tack them to inflation. That's just bad policy. One, so we're gonna have to watch for unemployment insurance. I don't know that the Senate is on the same page, so we may not see movement this year, but the issue that I thought would just never go away continues to not go away. Two, minimum wage. We have a real discussion around minimum wage this year. What that looks like, I don't know. I've heard 3 different versions of what minimum wage could be. I think the business community needs to have, I think you need to look in the mirror and splash some cold water on our face, and I'll just say it when we talk about minimum wage and the reality of it. And I know that this does not apply to everyone perfectly across the board, but one, if the state just, currently we're ramping up to $15, right? if the state just jumps to $15 and we skip the phase in, I don't know that we need to raise holy hell over that. And I say that because most industries, and certainly some of you that may have minimum wage employees are probably looking at me like, you're the worst person. But traditionally, a lot of the industries that pay minimum wage workers, think transportation, hotel, restaurants, construction, the labor statistics, they're paying far above and beyond $15. I just had a conversation with a hotelier, and this is not a motel on the side of the road. This is a very well-known hotel brand. The individual said he cannot hire anyone to come clean his hotel rooms for less than $30 an hour.
Wow.
Less than $30 an hour. In some instances, he says he has to pay cash under the table because people can go get jobs that pay cash, and that's the only way he can get his hotels cleaned. Just had a conversation with the hospitals, Hospital Association 2 days ago, and similarly, they cannot get medical assistance for less than, it's like an astronomical amounts of money. And so these typically, what we would consider minimum wage-ish workers are far above beyond wage. And so the $15 jump, it's going to impact small businesses in particular. It's going to impact high school workers, and yes, there are some individuals that live at that level, but it is by far and away the vast minority of employees and employers impacted by that. So, go ahead.
Yeah, and from a medium-sized business, I can't find anyone for $15 an hour.
Yeah.
I can't find anyone for less than 18 for entry level. I think the bigger issue that we're seeing is the wage compression for everybody else that we have on our books.
So that segues, it's a perfect segue, the wage compression issue. I think the other thing, minimum wage, we need to look for, potentially going to $20 an hour. I think that is maybe a harder pill to swallow, right? Particularly for smaller businesses, you're starting to creep into medium-sized businesses, but it's going to cause a lot of wage compression. So right now, maybe you are paying someone $20 an hour, and they've worked there for 2 years, and now you have to pay the entry-level person $20 an hour. That person says, well, you now owe me $27 an hour because I've been here for 3 years or whatever. And so the wage compression there is real. So $20 an hour, I think it's a much different conversation. The third proposal I have heard, and I hope that this is not true, but it is to raise the minimum wage to $15 or $20 an hour or somewhere in between, and then tack it to inflation. So it goes up every single year to inflation. I find that to be so interesting, and the legislature seems to be obsessed with this whole attach things to inflation because it's like a set it and forget it mentality.
Yeah.
But businesses' profits don't go up by 9% every single year. So the idea that you have to automatically increase labor costs by it's 9%, 10% inflation right now, 8% every single year is kind of absurd. So every medium and small business owner I know struggles to make a profit every single year. They don't have these 20% margins that everyone thinks that they're, they got pockets full of cash. So I think that is really concerning. And we're seeing that in a lot of other areas. We're seeing that's going to be part of the unemployment insurance discussion. We've seen it in some other proposals, the pay proposal, right? Those benefits are indexed to inflation. So it's something that the legislature seems to be moving towards, which we don't support.
I hear you.
In the back.
I hear you
the chamber is not supportive of. But I think that's what we need to be concerned with. So minimum wage, I think we're going to work. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on paid leave because you have heard me talk about all this stuff. If you've heard me speak before ad nauseum. There's going to be a big push to address paid family medical leave this year. But otherwise, I think it should be a relatively quiet session. I don't think we're going to see a big push on greenhouse gas stuff anymore like there was last year because there was such a large bill passed that everyone's trying to figure out what's going on. How do we come into compliance? What's the next move? And so those are going to be kind of I think it's going to be a get to know each other and feel each other out session, I think. No major tax increases like Delegate Guyton said is my expectation. So I don't know that it's going to be super eventful. I think it's going to be like an education session. That's my call. Talk about a lot of the education stuff. I do know that the speaker wants to focus on what's called middle housing. The Realtors Association calls it the missing middle. And the best way to think about it is just the lack of housing for your standard, family, I have a decently paying job and I can't afford to buy a house in my community where I live because it's all super expensive McMansions, or unfortunately what we're seeing in some jurisdictions, we're seeing very, very wealthy people in very big houses, and we're seeing very, very low income in very, very poor housing conditions. And so there's going to be a real concerted effort to address that, which we'll be working on, because it's, when you talk about businesses, business attraction, and labor force, I mean, you can't get the best and brightest if they can't afford to live here. So
I think another big issue is we will possibly be moving toward making some of the grants and incentives for recruitment and retention of childcare workers and
Yes.
childcare expansion more permanent. And I think that really helps this community. And same with some other professions, you know, teachers, recruitment, retention, doctors, nurses, all of the things that we've had great shortages of. We're going to start thinking, police officers, we're going to start thinking about how to really support our workers that are essential in a more powerful way. That doesn't necessarily influence you all as business owners, but certainly will help improve the community. So
yeah, the workforce is like the word right now. And workforce development is across all industries. You know, coming out of the whole COVID deal, it's been difficult for a lot of businesses and a lot of industries to bring workers back on. It's very difficult to retain workers. It's really difficult to find qualified workers. It's really difficult. The whole workforce issue. It's an issue from top to bottom. Like pick one, it's an issue. So I think that's going to be a top of everyone's mind. But, so I'll stop there, and I'll take questions. Any question?
Quick question. Reference to the election in terms of small business.
Yep.
So we had two major kind of initiatives that were kind of passed. One, mobile gambling here in Maryland, as well as legalization of marijuana. One of the things that we kind of spoke about with some of the caucus members is how do those industries create opportunities for small businesses and individuals on the other side. So we see a lot of large, proliferation of businesses, but what opportunities are going to be created for small individuals and small businesses to be able to kind of benefit from those two missions?
I don't know that I could speak to that a whole ton, right, to be honest, and particularly mobile gambling.
I can speak to a little bit.
Yeah, particularly mobile gambling. We have not been super involved in mobile gambling, other than we've been generally supportive. And in fact, the cannabis issue, I've kind of been like the fly in the ointment on it a little bit, because it creates a lot of issues for our employers, particularly federal contractors. And so I've kind of been the guy in the room saying, hey, this is creating a problem. So not, I haven't been necessarily on that side, but any.
I think that policy for the cannabis legalization is going to take us a minute. I wouldn't expect that the Health and Government Operations Committee is going to come out with that at the beginning of the year and it's all going to be solved. I believe it's going to take a minute. And it should, in my opinion, be a very thoughtful rollout. I don't think it's going to be taxed a lot, though, because we don't. And one of the issues for legalization is that we kind of get rid of that black market and that crime. Okay, but that's a different conversation. The mobile sports betting almost was completely sunk at the last minute on the floor because of exactly the issues that you're bringing up. So minority-owned businesses, small businesses, because it looked like it was going to be a monopoly of just like the big DraftKings, which it kind of is right now. But that's not how it's really designed to work. So there are, I can send you the bill if you want to see it, but there was a protective bill in there to ensure that we had women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses, and smaller businesses able to participate in that. It's taking them a little bit longer, I think, to somehow jump through the hoops of getting the licenses.
Yeah.
I mean, I know I also represent the state fair here in this district, and even they have had a lot of problems because they're a nonprofit, right? And they don't have a lot of those resources. So it is on the books. We need to look at enforcement of that.
Yeah, and I think as far as mobile sports betting has rolled out, if you look at the platforms that have kind of rolled out, I think that there are like one or two, it's not small businesses that have kind of rolled out a platform. You're seeing ads for DraftKings, FanDuel, and BetMGM, and that kind of stuff. But I think that there are a few participating, but to Doug's point, I think the intention is that there will be a focus specifically to medium and small businesses to go.
And that will happen with cannabis as well. I'm certain of it.
Will we, one second, with that.
Yep.
Will we be scalping any of that money, any of that revenue to support small businesses like we've seen, maybe the Boost Fund, what we did with casino gambling a couple years ago as a remedy for some of those things?
It's a good point. I can tell you that we specifically have not been having the conversation. And typically when I have those conversations, I talk about how do we use this money for economic development programs. We have not been talking about that as it comes to cannabis or sports betting. I think the focus of the revenue from those two ventures has really been on education. I think the focus has really been education. And, you know, I'm not saying rightfully or I just think that we have not been asking for that money. Now, there are some other areas that we are going to have discussions about filtering some revenue back to economic development programs that I think are maybe better suited. And with cannabis and mobile sports betting, everyone's like, ooh, it's the world's biggest pot of cash. And so everyone's trying to get, you know, everyone's hand is in the cookie jar. So I think it's maybe a little bit harder to fight over that money, to be completely honest with you, than it is in some other areas. 2 cents. So, yep.
Two quick questions. The first one, so I know Washington State, I think it was last year, 2 years ago, passed a law in regards to addressing long-term care, healthcare for seniors, a tax on payroll, and that whole rollout was kind of a dumpster fire.
Yeah.
Is Maryland looking at that? Where?
So I don't know that there is like a concerted effort far enough along to say, hey, we have a piece of legislation and we're going to have this program yet. But I do know with some certainty that there are members of the General Assembly, I mean, it's a real issue. There are members of the General Assembly looking at how do we as a state address long-term care. I don't know that there is any effort that's far enough along to say, hey, here's what a program would look like, so I don't know if you know any different than that, but I don't think so at this point.
One of the biggest things I found with education, they're constantly, saying we need more money for education. In particular, I do business in Baltimore County, live in Baltimore City. The problem, one of the biggest problems, I can say what the problem is. One of the biggest problems is broken families. And I'm not just saying traditionally nuclear families by the father. But I have a kid now I'm working with. He's 6th grade. He goes to Baltimore County School. He does nothing. His books were in December. He has empty notebooks. So I went the extra mile to try to help him and went to his house. He said, I don't want to do homework. I won't do homework. I even went as far as saying, oh man, I'll just lock you in a room with me and we'll just read all day. He said, I'll stay there until I die. I'm not doing homework. His family is also displaced. And I found that children who are in whether it's a displaced home or they have parents who don't really value education, so we keep attacking the kids, saying more money for education. If they go, educators, and I'm also looking to start a school, Spice Lake private school, but you have all day these kids are in school saying do homework, but they go home and this kid's mother is like, okay, he won't do his homework. His aunt saying, hey, we'll give you $30 a week. Like you said, we pay kids not to do homework. So how do we, because those are the concerns that need to be addressed as well. Again, it's not one problem, but the households are messed up.
So education is my jam.
Yeah.
So, so I'm happy to talk. I'll talk to you in detail, but I will tell you that with the blueprint, with this huge $400 million plan that we have coming our way, a huge part of that is community support, community schools, family engagement. So it's not and special needs supports and and tutoring just for remediation. So those things are being addressed in this new plan. We just haven't had time, and the VCPS people can say, like, it hasn't all been rolled out yet. We're in the process, just like CTE. It's a huge component of that plan. So all I will say is the wheels move more slowly than any of us would like, but they are. I am confident they're moving in the right direction for those things. And I would love to talk to you about some of my initiatives for early trauma and identification, all that.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, and definitely not like an answer you probably want to hear, but I also think sometimes when you talk about like the moral prop of some of this stuff, that's hard. You know how difficult that is to, let's say, go to Delegate Guyton in a 90-day session. Hey, I have a bill that's going to fix this. That's a product of 1,000 things. It's jobs, it's it's education of parents, it's community support, it's a decades-long issue that it's how do you address that in a single piece of legislation?
If you do, if you have that bill, I promise I will push it as hard as I can.
a
Unicorn.
it's a real component, but
Yeah.
when you're trying to wrap your arms around it's hard.
Right.
You know.
Okay.
So.
In the interest of time, and you know, it is 10 o'clock, so I'll kind of let Andrew wrap up with one or two more questions for the group.
Any other questions, you can always get me after. But I appreciate it as always, and Brandon's my contact, and so if you guys have questions, obviously we'd love to have you involved in the Maryland Chamber, but if you have questions about anything, open door, please let me know. Give you an answer whether you like it or not.
Also, just to kind of follow up on Andrew, is that as part of the Baltimore County Chamber of Commerce, if you're a business under 10 employees, you're automatically part of our federation membership, which allows you to have access to Andrew, as well as some of their committee opportunities and things like that also. So if you need more information about that, please send me an email. We'll definitely get you rolled up in there. Have a great day. Please make some money today. I can't wait to see you guys kind of next month on January 12th. So the second Thursday of the month, and have a great holiday, and please have a great day, and thank you for coming out. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.